The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
You've always got time for Short Time.
Hey, it's Warren Lopez.
David Taylor.
Brent Metcalf. Johnny Hendricks. Tony Ramos. Bubba J.
Mike Golick.
Matthew Modine. The one and only Chael Sonnen. And you are listening to the one and only Short Time Wrestling Podcast by the often imitated and never duplicated Jason Bryant.
Now for the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, we're going to visit with ESPN's Amin, a guy who has basically stolen my career path and done it for himself, and quite well, I might add. The voice of the NCAA Wrestling Championships the last couple of years. Mr. Amin, before we even get into sports and wrestling, welcome to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast.
I really appreciate you taking the time to contact me for this, and this is awesome, man. I mean, I'm a fan of yours and the work that you do, man. This is awesome. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I guess the same could be said because as we record this on Friday, January 27th, you just finished up on Thursday night calling the crosstown shootout with Xavier in Cincinnati in men's college basketball. One of the rivalries that I hold near and dear to my heart. But for those of you that know about this rivalry with two schools from the city of Cincinnati, what's it like to call that game between these two programs?
So I think a lot of sports fans in general understand, Duke, North Carolina is such an intense rivalry. They get that. They see Louisville, Kentucky in basketball. They see Ohio State and Michigan in football and how intense those rivalries are. But I think what people don't necessarily realize, maybe it's just because they're not familiar with it, is Cincinnati and Xavier are separated by like 3 miles. Like they're down the road from each other. You can get from one campus to the other in minutes. And that proximity has probably bred more hatred in this rivalry than just about any other in college basketball. There's a respect level with Duke and North Carolina. There's a respect level with Louisville and Kentucky. But the people I talk to in town, and I'm certain they're biased towards this particular rivalry, but they say that it's pure hatred. I mean, if you grow up in Cincinnati, you root for one or you root for the other, or you're probably not a fan. So, I mean, the intensity of this rivalry is bred from the beginning. We had a great video on our broadcast last night of newborn babies at UC Hospital that were already being given beat Xavier blankets. So, like, that's the type of intensity that you're indoctrinated into when you're born in this city and you become a fan, or you're the child of a fan of one of the schools.
Yeah, and of course, there's the Catholic institution that is Xavier also brings that whole religious animosity into things as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then you got state versus private school. It's the state school in Cincinnati that has 25,000 undergrads. And then you have the private Jesuit school in Xavier that has 4,000, 5,000 undergrads. So, I mean, there's implications being made. It's like, well, you guys are the soft, private school and you're the thugs at the public school or whatever. Like these are the implications that are made when you're part of this rivalry. You just make these prejudicial assumptions about the people that root for the other team. That's how intense it really is. I mean, that's what makes it fun though. I mean, and last night, to both coaches and teams' credit, they played with a lot of integrity. It was a really classy display between both teams, handshakes at the end. There was some mutual respect there. But it was one of the most intense college basketball games I've seen all year.
Yeah, one of the few times we'll actually mention college basketball on this show, or even the B word in general. But I got to get to my story, as we were talking right before we started out. As a sports fan growing up, I was a guy that listened to sports radio. We had 1310 was the all sports radio station back in Hampton, Newport News, where I grew up. It's now ESPN 94.1, so it's an ESPN affiliate now. But I would listen to sports radio at night, and I would turn the dial. And that was the amazing thing about radio stations is, the 50,000 watt stations, I could get, 660 WFAN out of New York, but I could also pick up WLW 700 out of Cincinnati, which was the flagship radio station for Xavier basketball in the Pete Gillen era, where he had Tyrone Hill and Derek Strong on that team that beat Georgetown back in 91, that era. And I became a Xavier basketball fan because I could pick their games up every single night on the radio. And of course, that was the year they happened to beat Georgetown with Mourning and Mutombo and all my friends in the the block were Georgetown fans. I'm like, I picked the team that starts with an X. And I've been kind of following them ever since, other than, Old Dominion's the only other team that, I don't believe in the number 2 team thing, but I've had an ODU basketball season ticket since I was like in 6th grade. But I always followed Xavier basketball because I could hear him on the radio. So it was kind of cool for me to realize, okay, you're going to come on the show, and then you just called the crosstown rivalry. So I feel like I have a little tie to Xavier there, and it just kind of mixes with what we're going to do today.
Yeah, but isn't that amazing though, JB? I mean, this is the power of two things: the power of the medium of radio, which is what I grew up in, and it's the power of sports in general that gives you an attachment to a place that maybe you wouldn't have had any other connection to otherwise. Like your story's not original. It's not the first. I hope it won't be the last. I feel like there's so many people out there that have a similar story like you just told me. And I think it's so cool that it shows the connection and the power of those two things, the medium of radio and the power of sports in general. I really, really think that's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that goes back to the old time, why so many people were Yankees fans. And because, one, they were on TV all the time because they were owned by CBS. But you could pick up the New York radio stations all over the East Coast in those years.
Yeah, and for me, I grew up in Chicago, so we had, powerful radio stations in the city, but I was able to pick up, Mets games when I was going to school in Indiana. If I was standing in the right spot on campus, I could flip on WFAN, and I was like my only connection to the New York Mets, but I liked their broadcasters, and it was cool for me later in my career when I kind of started up my career and started doing Major League Baseball and things like that, to go up to Howie Rose, the radio voice of the New York Mets, and say, hi, I knew who you were before. Like, I'm not from New York. I'm not from the East Coast. I have no connection to the New York Mets. I grew up a Cub fan, but I just wanted to tell you, I could hear the games growing up because we could get FAN in Indiana. And I just wanted to tell you, I'm a big fan of yours. And he was moved by that. I thought that was so cool that I was able to talk to somebody I look up to that I had no connection with whatsoever, and be able to tell him I was able to listen to him growing up. Again, it's just the power of that medium that really sticks out to me.
Talking with Adam Amin here on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. You've had the opportunity to call the last couple NCAA Division I Wrestling Championships for ESPN. You're not going to be in that role this year. But before we get, again, I've pitched that twice. We're going to talk about the wrestling here in a bit. But I'm really interested in your career. More or less, this is a personal show here, folks. So if you're listening, yes, I'm going to pick his brain about broadcasting because this has been my life for over 20 years. But getting into it, I read an interview you did with, I believe it was a journalism class from the University of Oregon, talking about your route and what you love about sports. And it's not necessarily the game, the team, or the sport itself. It's the crowd that really feeds into your passion for broadcasting. Kind of explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about being a fan of a certain sport, being a fan of a certain team, and I certainly am those things for sports and teams. But I really love this job more than anything else. I think when we get kind of caught up covering sports the way a lot of us do, and I cover it pretty much year round. I mean, there's not a whole lot of time where I'm not covering something. I've always felt like I appreciate the job even more than I do sport, a sport or a team, or even sports in general. I kind of appreciate the craft of all this more. And part of the craft of broadcasting to me has always been, specifically play-by-play, has always been feeding off the energy of the people that are watching an event. You're in the building with 10,000 people, 13,000 people at Cincinnati last night, 60,000 people at an NFL game, maybe 100,000 people at an SEC or Big Ten football game. So you're constantly feeding off that energy. If the crowd is up, something's going on. Something is happening in front of them that they feel collectively is so important that they're all roaring in unison. So why wouldn't you want to feed off of that? Why wouldn't you want to have that be a factor in how you call your game, or how you tailor your call, or how you go about telling the story of that particular game or night? It's the crowd that's telling you a lot of that. And the one thing that I especially loved about doing the wrestling championships, because wrestling is a sport that I was introduced to in 2010, early 2010, when I was working in Iowa. And I worked in small town radio in Iowa. And part of my job as a sports director for a couple radio stations in the Okoboji, Spirit Lake area was to cover wrestling. And the stands were always packed. There was always buzz for high school wrestling. So I understood that there was an appreciation for this sport. It was a popular sport, specifically in the state of Iowa. Fast forward a few years, and I start to call the NCAA wrestling championships for ESPN. And I was nervous. I was a little unsure of myself in that role because I had limited exposure to the sport. But then you get to Saturday night, and we go from being up top in the hockey booth at Scott Trade Center in St. Louis to being down on the mat. And right before we go on the air and the crowd starts to swell and they realize that we're about to go on TV and the night's about to begin, that energy is some of the best and most intense energy I've ever felt in my career at any event working at ESPN. And that energy made me realize that first year, that energy made me realize how big and how important this whole thing really was to everybody. And I didn't really have an appreciation for it fully my first year because, again, I was just getting my feet wet and learning. But after that Saturday night, I finally understood why this was such a big event. And that was maybe the biggest pleasure of my 5-year run doing the championships was Saturday night. There was no better feeling than going right before we went on the air and hearing the crowd kind of swell and kind of come up in unison right before we went on the air for the NCAA championships on Saturday night.
I've got to believe that some of your colleagues at ESPN would ask you, like, hey, so they put you on wrestling. How was that? What is your response to them when they kind of maybe look at you quizzically or ask you quizzically, like, wrestling?
I think the response is that Saturday night thing. I mean, I tell people, hey, the crew that we have on that show that works tirelessly for those 4 nights, I mean, is phenomenal. I mean, it's top-notch producers, directors, graphics people. They work their butts off, and to have that quality of a crew, because and I'm sure there are fans out there that might not agree with it, and that's okay. I'm just pulling back the curtain a little bit for them. I'm letting you know that the people that work on that show love working on that show. They're high-quality people in their positions, and their passion is a big reason why we have such a fun time over the course of the week that we're there for the championships. I tell people it's one of the most exciting shows that you'll ever be a part of, especially Saturday night. It's super intense. The passion is there from the fans. I didn't, again, until you really get a chance to do some more niche sports, which I've done volleyball, I do college softball, I've done the wrestling championships, I've done water polo. I've done a lot of different things in my career, and the audiences are different for those particular sports. They're hardcore fans. They're passionate about it. You're not going to get a ton of casual fans coming over for NCAA softball. You'll get some, and you want to cater to them a little bit, but you're going to get the hardcore fans. The people that want to watch these events are going to watch them. So they care about them. They know about them. They're knowledgeable. So that passion of that fan base bleeds over into the passion of the crew. And that's the first thing I tell people about that event. There's no feeling you'll ever have as an announcer for one of these events like you do on Saturday nights, standing mat side and talking about the event. And I always say that these are the best athletes in college sports. That's the other thing that I really grew to appreciate over 5 years. You're going to look at these guys and go, man, they are warriors. I mean, think about, like, I literally tell friends of mine, like, wrestle your buddy for like a minute, like really wrestle him for like, just like, even if you're playing around, do it for a minute and see how hard you're breathing at the end of that. Now think about doing that for 7 straight minutes. I mean, the level of athleticism of these young men is incredible to me. And that's something I'll never forget. I'll never not appreciate what these guys go through on a yearly basis to put their bodies through what they put them through and what they put them through in those 7 minutes every single night on the mat.
Yeah, I want to circle back to that production thing you talked about a little bit in regards to, calling the action. Jerry Daniels has been one of the producers on the show for a long time. I was at one point, I think it was 2009. I was the stats gopher for that crew before I actually moved on to other projects. But you've had the ability to work with Tim Johnson, Anthony Robles, the late Jeff Blatnick. What is it like when you go into a situation and you again talk about ESPN lends credibility to everything, but when you walk in to say the Scott Trade Center last year at Madison Square Garden, and you're probably, if you look around in the people that are on the floor, you're probably the guy that knows the least amount about wrestling than the other 18,000 people in the facility and the people watching at home. How do you make sure that you don't try to come off like you're trying too hard and trying to inform? I guess you alluded to this a little bit with softball, but to just basically, as Jim Gibbons likes to say, the down and distance type of stuff, to make sure that you set up TJ and Robles so they can just knock it out of the park with their knowledge.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you're trying to do. I mean, JB, I'm not going to fool anybody and make them think I'm an expert on the sport. I know enough about it. I've learned about it. I've studied it. I prepare it, and I watch a lot of it in the lead up to those championships, just so I feel like I have a grasp on what I need to know, what a fan needs to know, and really situationally is what I care about the most. I mean, the great equalizer in television is that you don't really have to talk because people can see what's going on. It's the more nuanced stuff that maybe the casual fan may not pick up on. Hey, tell me why him getting under a minute of riding time, why this guy on top biting into the riding time and getting it under a minute is important. Why is that important? Well, here's why. Because in a minute, if this thing is still tied up, we're going to go to sudden victory. So just being able to understand just situational stuff. And I understand that for hardcore wrestling fans, they go, duh, we know that, man. We don't need to know that. Yeah, you don't need to know that, but there are some fans out there that there are a lot of fans out there, frankly, that do need to know that. The same reason when I say on a football broadcast, there has to be indisputable video evidence for them to overturn the call on the field. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of football fans, hardcore fans, know that rule and hear that phrase said so often, but it's not just the hardcore fan that we have to cater to. We still have to start at the fundamentals. We still have to start at the basics. I still need to know that it's a 2-point takedown. You still need to know why near fall points affect this particular match between these two guys. You have to be able to just give that stuff. And as long as I was on top of those things and on top of rules and on top of as much of the situational stuff as possible, the only other thing I had to worry about was asking Tim, guiding Tim, asking Anthony, guiding Anthony, and getting them into their strike zones to be able to talk about technical stuff, big picture topics of the sport, the tournament setting itself, how this match is going to affect the overall scope of the championship run. Those are the things that you're gunning for. It's not ideal for me because I want to be a play-by-play guy that is so immersed in the sports that he's covering that I could analyze it. Wrestling is not one of those things because the people that understand this sport are so smart. Like the level of intricacy and nuance that they understand about this sport is incredible. That's why analysts do what they do. That's why play-by-play guys do what they do. But I've always been somebody that likes to blur those lines a little bit. That's why I love working with Tim, because he does both jobs, so he understands the roles of both. It's why I love Anthony, because he's so mechanically sound and understands the nuances of this sport that he can really go into detail about why something is important. And for me, I tried to step over into that world as much as possible, but I didn't want to overstep my bounds to the point where A, I exposed myself as just a plain idiot, or B, I made somebody feel like they didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, with Anthony, he's coming into this role where, Jeff Blatnick had passed away and he had been in that third analyst role for such a long time. And he was kind of green when it comes to the broadcasting side. He had done some public speaking. I think he'd done some stuff at the Pac-12 network, but he really had very, very little television experience when he gets thrown onto the team with you guys. How did you deal with that situation? How coachable was he, or how much of a natural was he in that role?
I think he was natural in his confidence in being in front of people, knowing that he's gonna have to structure sentences together. Which JB, I know, I'm sure people talk to you about this all the time and go, "Oh, I'd love to do what you do," but and again, it's not like it's rocket science. What we do is not it's not anything that takes an incredible amount of education or anything like that. Some people are just good at this, but that's a skill in and of itself. Like being able to just talk in front of people coherently and structure sentences together. Like that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, because if it was, everybody would be able to do it. And for Anthony, that part of it was very natural. He could stand in front of a room of thousands of people, or he could talk to you one-on-one and he'll look you in the eye and he has confidence in what he's saying. For him, it was about the mechanics of television, when to come in, when to come out, what makes good TV. a lot of the guys that have trouble making the transition into TV are guys who can't put thoughts together that would take maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes to explain and condense them into 15 to 20 to 30 seconds. That is a hard thing to do, to be able to be efficient enough and understand priority of the words that you're using and to be able to put those together into sentences that are easy to understand and process, but also have meat and substance and structure and depth to them. And, I think it's kind of ironic that I'm saying this while I'm sort of rambling about it, but I know where I'm, you know what I mean? But like, I know where I'm going with this. And for me, it's always just been a broadcast is only as good as what a listener and viewer can process. And Anthony, that was just the biggest thing. Like, what do I say to make sure that the listener and viewer goes away understanding exactly what I wanted them to understand? And he was a natural at speaking. Some of the mechanical stuff on the TV side he was working on. And as the years have gone on, he's really become a pleasure to work with. You use the word coachable. Anthony's one of the most coachable people you'll ever meet.
Now, when you talk about coachability, how coachable were you coming up? Because there's a lot of situations where we get young broadcasters come in, they get a taste of success early, they get an opportunity early, and maybe the ego can get to them. And it's like, well, I'm already here at X years old. You were working for ESPN at 24, which is, I'll be quite honest with you. My ego was to the point where I thought, okay, I've got experience in high school. I'm going to go in and get my degree. I'm going to be on ESPN by the time I was 25. Didn't happen that way. This thing called wrestling got in the way. And one, there's a lot more competition in the field out there than you realize, especially nowadays. But when you're going through this as a young broadcaster, how important is it for you to be like, shut up and listen to what these guys like Ian Eagle, who you'd mentioned is in one of these interviews, and he really kind of helped you get where you're at. But when he talked, how was it just, okay, shut up and listen?
I mean, you learn more when you're not talking, than anything else. I think that's a lesson we could probably all learn. And listen, I'm still trying to be coachable. I'm 6 years into this thing at ESPN. I think I've had a really fun run so far, and I hope it goes, for a long, long time. But, it's easy to get caught up in, man, I'm doing this game and I get this game and I'm doing the NFL and MLB and NBA and big college football and all this. And it's easy to get caught up in thinking, well, I guess I've done something right, so I don't have to improve or I don't have to work on this stuff. Heck, I just talked to my boss this morning and he was giving me notes, and it's still on the track of trying to get better each broadcast you do. You have to be coachable at this. You have to be able to take criticism and know that people aren't telling you you're bad at your job. They're trying to tell you that, hey, this is how to be better at your job. This is how to make the experience for the listener, the viewer, the fan better than it is right now. And you can always be better. There's no perfect broadcast, but the chase for it should always be lighting you. You should always understand that you can be better. You can have a better broadcast the next night than you had the night before. Whatever reason it may be, I can use a better word. I can be more efficient. I can talk slower. I can use a better number. I can be more prepared. Whatever it is, you can always do a better job than the job you did the night before. And Ian, whenever he speaks, I listen. If he tells me something, I take it to heart. When my bosses call me and say, hey, great job, but I'm listening to the second part. I appreciate the great job. I'm happy that you're happy with my performance, but give me the notes. I want to know what you think is important to make me better, to make our crew better, to make me do a better job with the analyst, with the producer, the director, whatever you can tell me that's going to make it better for me and easier on me or easier on my analyst or easier on our crew or easier for the fan. Tell me what I can do. And if you have that attitude going forward for the rest of your career, I've always told young guys, like, you have to be aware that you can always get better. You have to seek out constructive criticism, and you have to be able to look back at yourself and say, what can I do differently? What can I do better? You can never settle for whatever it is that you're doing until you get to the point where guys like Brent Musburger are, or Al Michaels are, or whatever. And, the real legend, the people that we consider legends of this business, until you get to that point, you can always get better. Those guys are Hall of Famers for a reason. They get to do whatever they want to do. For the rest of us, we're just chasing it, man. We're chasing the perfect broadcast.
Yeah, I got to heckle Al Michaels just a little bit down in Rio. It wasn't any serious heckling. It's like, Al Michael. He just looked over, gave me the nod, and I'm like, photobombing Ryan Seacrest and stuff like that on Olympic Night Live. But
oh, that's awesome, man.
One thing that you talk about is when you're in that setting. And I remember the first time I did live television, and that red light went on. and there's that jump from your stomach into your throat. What do you remember about your first live television gig where this is like you're on camera? I mean, was there that moment you're like, oh shit, I'm about to go live?
Yeah, it still kind of hits me that way. I've been able to develop it to the point where I'm not just so jumpy right when the red light goes on. I feel a little bit more natural, and I'd hope I would after, a few hundred broadcasts or whatever. But no, I still remember it. First national broadcast I did was in August of 2011, and we were doing a high school football game on ESPN2, and it was, the week before the college football season starts. So all these crews go out.
Wow, starting out big time there.
Yeah, exactly, man. So and again, for me, it was kind of like, all right, this is how I'm starting up. And I'll say this too. I wasn't a big football guy when I first started. Like, I had only done maybe 5 or 6 high school football games in my career on the radio before I jumped on at ESPN. I was a baseball, basketball, like volleyball guy. I was doing more Olympic sports. I was doing tennis and softball, and then doing college basketball. Like, that was more my wheelhouse. I was a minor league baseball guy. That was more my wheelhouse. And then they throw me on a football package, and it starts the week before college, where all these crews go out and do high school football games, with good high school teams. And I'm thrown on to ESPN2, and I'm like, all right, this is it. I guess this is how it works. And I remember the red light going on and just thinking, all right, don't screw it up, because this is it. This is your career. And if you don't do this, like, what else are you really going to do? Like, I don't know what else I could really do. I don't know what I'm good at. So some of it was fear. I think fear drives us in a positive way if we let it drive us in a positive way sometimes. And, for me, it's become more of a the camera has become more of just kind of a bystander at this point. I've tried to develop the, I guess, ability, if you want to call it that. I'd almost consider it more of a habit to think of a camera that comes on to bring you guys on camera for the start of a game. I almost think of that more as just your buddy or your bystander, and you're just talking with your friend, that's sitting next to you about what's going on. I actually don't look into the camera very often when my partner's talking anymore, because I want to listen to them. I don't even think about the camera as much. So, I've had to think about that over the course of the last few years, but you let that habit and that ability develop as the years go on, and you get more comfortable, like you would with just about anything else you do. The more you do it, the better you're going to be, and the more comfortable you're going to be with it. But that still gets me, man. I mean, I think I would probably say for you too, right? Every time you go on air, or every time you're about to do a PA gig, or anytime you're about to talk in front of what is going to be an audience, you always have that little jump, and I hope that that's a good thing. I think of it as still a good thing. That means I'm still excited and pumped to do this job.
Yeah, that's the reason I actually asked the question, because I'm friends with Jim Gibbons, Tim Johnson, Shane Sparks. They've all kind of talked about that moment beforehand. But it is the PA. Like at Nationals, I stretch out. I walk down off the table. I kind of I'm not an athlete. Let's be clear here. I'm not trying to say I'm pumping myself up like Kyle Dake is going out there to win a title, but you got to get your head right. And then there's that big deep breath, and then I'm ready to roll. And people also realize that, I talk all the time. Like, I literally talk nonstop. But when you are forced to talk for 2.5 to 3 hours, there's a little bit of a different thing that goes on, whether it be PA, whether it be broadcasting, even if it's tape delay. I don't get as flighty with tape delay because I'm sitting here knowing I'm doing it from my basement. But you're absolutely right. So I was kind of curious on where you stood with that, because I'm wondering, okay, is this just me being like, crazy neurotic, or is this something that all the broadcasters go through? So
no way, man. I think you have to have that almost. Like, I kind of I embrace that. I embrace that nervous energy that keeps me going. I mean, listen, I work a lot and I love it. And I'm passionate about this craft and the job, like I told you, but it can wear on you. It is a grind to go from event to event, from plane to plane, from rental car to rental car, to hotel, and just dig your face into your laptop and go back to preparation and reading notes, and it can become tedious at times. And, I'm sitting here in a hotel room in Cincinnati right now, getting ready to drive to Lexington. I've got another game in a day. So, that can be a grind, to be away from family, to be away from home, to be away from the comforts of what you've structured for yourself. But every night, every day when I'm about to go on air, that hits me again. That energy hits me. And I go, oh my God, I get to do this again. Like, how cool is this? I get to do it again. I wouldn't want to liken it to an addiction or a drug or anything like that, because I hope I'm not dependent on it. But it is the thing that gives me the most juice. Pretty much day in, day out, it's the thing that gives me the most energy and the most juice to get up for this. Hey, we get to be on TV. We get to talk about sports. We get paid to do this. And hopefully we're going to see something amazing, and we're going to see something fun, and we're going to see something that has energy and adrenaline and has juice. And that's the thing that gets me excited every day. So if I don't have that, then I'll be worried. I'll be worried if the red light comes on and I'm not excited to talk about whatever it is we're getting ready to talk about. So I'm happy you have it. I'm happy I have it, because I do think that's important.
You talk about the niche sports, the Olympic sports, and you referenced volleyball quite a bit, which is what you played in high school as probably your predominant sport. But when getting into broadcasting, you realized this is what you wanted to do. Did you feel like you felt like to make yourself the most marketable, the most valuable to any particular network that would hire you, is to have a background in everything? I kind of followed the Vern Lundquist model, be like, this guy can call SEC football and he can call golf. I want to be able to do everything. I mean, how much of that was when you're on, be like, okay, you can put me in any sport and I'm comfortable. If it's almost a sport, you're going to be on ESPN 8, the Ocho.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big Ocho guy, basically. You know, and
you were the Ocho guy.
Honestly, that's how I first came up. You know, it was the stuff that wasn't getting viewed as much. And you know what? I'm glad it was that way for me. Now, listen, I got to ESPN at 24, but I wasn't doing major stuff necessarily, what people would consider to be high-profile events. You know, the sports have their high-profile moments. Every sport does. The wrestling championships. When you get to do nationals, that's a high-profile event. That's 1 million people watching on Saturday night, plus whoever's watching online and all of that. So, like, that is a high-profile event. That was the highest-profile thing maybe I had done my first year. And then as year 2 and year 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 go on, now I get to do major college football. I get to cover the college football championship game. I get to do, big time college basketball games. I get to do the Women's College World Series. I get to do Major League Baseball and the NBA. So finally, like, I feel like I have a consistent portfolio of stuff, but all of that stemmed from coming in and really starting my career on TV, maybe in 2009, 2008, when I was still in college, and doing conference tennis championships online and saying, yeah, I'll go do the Division II Women's College World Series and do all the games all 11 games on the internet. I'll go do that. And I'll do the D1 tennis championship, and I'll do the Division II Elite 8. I'll do the 4 games in that one day on the internet. And then I'll go do, I get hired at ESPN, and I'm still doing, some good stuff, but a lot of it is also tape delayed MEAC and SWAC football at 10:30 Eastern on ESPNU, not necessarily a high profile game or high profile time slot. And I'm glad it happened that way, because for me, I don't think I'm a natural at this. I think I have some skills that maybe come naturally to me, but as a TV play-by-play announcer, I'm not a natural. I needed the reps. I needed more and more chances to figure out how to do this and how to get comfortable with it. So I'm glad that I was doing HBCU football. I'm glad I was doing college volleyball on a Wednesday night. I'm glad I was doing high school football for a couple of years on Friday nights, going up against some other games. I'm glad I was doing it that way, because it allowed me to find at a big time network where they're kind of grooming you, but in maybe a lower pressure situation. And that helped me move my career along maybe better than had I been thrown into a higher profile spot right away. So I'll never look back and say, man, I wish I was doing this before, because all of the stuff that I got to do, volleyball, softball, doing water polo, doing high school football, high school basketball, minor league baseball, college softball, doing all of these different things early and often helped me just get better at the craft. And I'll never disparage that. And that was always big for me. And by the way, JB, I do think my versatility has helped me now, because I do feel like people can lean on me for just about anything. Even if it's something brand new, they can say, well, he's done that and he seems to do okay with everything here. Let's throw him on this. And I do think wrestling is a big part of that too. There's not a lot of guys out there that have done it or tried to do it or want to do it. And I was happy to be one of those guys that did it for 5 years.
Yeah, and I think one thing people need to understand is when there's complaints about who's doing the call, you realize ESPN and NBC, they're not just going to pick the guy that's the expert and, okay, you're the lead guy. No, they're going to hire their guys. You're going to see with NBC, they hired Jason Knapp, who's their guy, with John Smith, a name that they know. ESPN, they've got you're their guy. They hired Tim Johnson, a name they know, a guy that's been doing it a long time. It's not like they're going to, well, these two guys should be doing nationals. It doesn't work like that with the networks. It's the network's going to put their guy in and usually find the sport-specific expert to kind of carry on with the color and kind of explain maybe how the placement on some of these things go and how you get the assignment for the Women's College World Series or how you get the assignment for NCAA wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, it was my first year, and like I said, I had covered wrestling in Iowa, and my coordinating producer, which is basically a guy like a boss who oversees a particular sport, and John Vassallo is the coordinating producer for wrestling and continues to be and really does a great job with it every single year. And he's a great guy to work for. He called me, I want to say a couple months beforehand, maybe in December of 2011, and just said, hey, do you have any experience covering wrestling? And I said, well, yeah, I do. I wasn't a ton, but I covered it. I covered state in Des Moines in Iowa, and I covered local meets, and I would go to duels, and I understood at the very least the basics of the sport. And he's like, well, listen, Todd Harris left. He went to NBC, and Todd Harris is essentially the guy I replaced at ESPN. He was kind of the reason that I got some of the opportunities I got. I basically stepped into his football package, and I stepped into his wrestling role. And he said, well, we need somebody to cover it, and I know you've covered it. Do you want to do it? I said, yeah, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And again, don't get me wrong, I was in a position at that point where I'm not going to say no to anything. I mean, I'm a first-year, 25-year-old play-by-play guy at ESPN. I'm not saying no to anything. Whatever you want me to do, you tell me, and I'm going to do it, and I'll do it with a smile on my face, and I'll do it as well as I possibly can. So that's simply how that came about. I'm one of their guys. They need one of their guys to be in that role. They want to groom guys as part of their company. And I get that wrestling fans may not have appreciated it. And heck, I would never get upset at a fan that said, hey, you missed something, or that you said something incorrectly, or you are not knowledgeable about this. Listen, I've never sat here and told people I know everything about the sport. And if people have complained about it, I understand. I'm not going to be upset about that. Well, I mean, I'll take it to heart. I do take it personally because that means I didn't do my job well enough, at the very least, fool a fan. If nothing else, you fake it till you make it. But I do feel like I stepped into the role as best as I could, and I prepared as hard as I possibly could. It was rocky year one because I didn't know how to prepare for the event necessarily. I just kind of took everything in as much as I could. But after year one, I really felt more comfortable with it. And they kept me around for it. That was the big thing. They kept me around and said, no, we appreciated the job you did. Here's some things you can do to improve. Here's some things that you already understand after being through the process in a year. And we'd love to have you back. And I didn't know I was going to do 5. I didn't know I was going to have the chance to do 5 in a row. And the fact that I even got a chance to do that is cool for me. I still do think that, there are fans out there that don't understand this process. You're going to hire your guys. You're going to put your guys into the biggest positions because we know they know they can trust you on the TV side of things. Because at the end of the day, this is still just TV. We still need to put the right people in position that understand the mechanics of all this. That's why some guys don't work out. And I understand that wrestling fans want the knowledge and information. That's why we bring in people like TJ, who is a Hall of Famer and has such a deep history and knowledge of it. That's why we bring in Jim Gibbons to do a lot of the backside stuff and to do the ESPN3 stuff. It's why we brought in somebody like Anthony Robles, not just because we think he's young and knowledgeable, but he also can connect with fans in a way that other people can't. Other wrestlers wouldn't be able to. He's a story that people know and can latch onto. And then hopefully that's enough of a hook for you to realize, hey, he also knows his stuff. So that's kind of the process in a very, surface level. That's kind of the process of how we go about putting some of these teams together.
One thing that's kind of piqued my interest a little bit is when you get involved in this and you start knowing wrestling people and wrestlers, and you've got it with probably softball, tennis, and of course you being such a volleyball guy. when you are around a sport and you start understanding the concerns that they have within the sport of wrestling, we have concerns about, adding more programs, stopping the stem of cuts at Division I, scholarship limitations. We're worried about the cost of attendance and how that's going to affect wrestling. What are some of those things that you learn about other sports by being involved in them that maybe as a sports fan, it kind of opens your eyes to be like, okay, there's a lot more moving parts to the sport, and they have real concerns that, Sports Center's not talking about day in, day out.
Yeah, especially when it comes to like revenue sports with college football and college basketball and things like that, and people talking about, well, we got to pay the players and things like that. The more people I talk to, especially in sports like softball, like volleyball, like wrestling, they have basic concerns. Like, we just hope that we have enough money to keep the sport alive. Forget about paying our guys. We want to be able to give them scholarship. We want to be able to bring them here so they can afford an education, plus be able to have a chance at wrestling at a high level. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I don't think people would realize about student athletes in general, especially in non-revenue sports. Like, covering so much softball, I'm not a proponent for paying players at the college football and college basketball at that level, because I look at softball players and I go, they would kill to be paid for what they do. They bring in a lot of viewers when it comes down to May and June of the Women's College World Series. Like, the softball World Series outrates college baseball's World Series. Like, we get 2-3 million people for the finals. Like, you don't get that for college baseball. So why are you considering paying them money and not paying college baseball players? I talk to college baseball coaches, volleyball coaches, wrestling coaches, and you know what? They're just trying to make sure that they have enough money to bring in a kid and give him an education, plus have him on the wrestling team. Like, there are legitimate concerns in the non-revenue sports that I wish more people realize, because that would change their perspective about the revenue sports. And listen, I'm not a proponent for the NCAA and saying like they're doing everything the right way, and I know they make a lot of money, but let's focus in on some of these other athletes that work their butts off to put on a show for us at ESPN, which in turn we can put on for you fans watching at home. And let's give them some credence as well. And I think that's opened my eyes a little bit more beyond just being a college football and college basketball guy. I see athletes at the pro level. I see athletes in revenue sports at college and non-revenue sports in college. And there's got to be a little bit more balance into how we approach and speak to the athletes in some of these other sports. I really do feel like it's opened my eyes a lot more to the situations and the complexities of the non-revenue sports. I have a lot more respect for people at that level maybe than others might, because I've had the chance to be around them so much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna look back to some of our experience. I lived with the wrestlers at ODU for a number of years, and there were points where, I mean, we had guys ranked in the country. We had one guy ranked in the country who's part of our team, and we're looking at the quality of people were in there, and they're basically half ride guys. I think we had six scholarships available at the time, and for lack of getting too descriptive on certain things, there are times that coffee filters were used to replace bathroom tissue because we didn't have any money.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, these are the. I mean, I'd hope that that's an extreme example of a story, and I hope if that's as bad as it gets, I hope people can actually kind of absorb that and realize these guys aren't making a killing in wrestling or softball or volleyball or archery or gymnastics or whatever it may be. I hope people realize that, and I hope they can at least understand that. There are other student athletes out there that would kill for some of these opportunities. I know that's an argument against some of the revenue sports. Like, hey, there's plenty of kids. Like, I would have killed to have a football scholarship. I had to pay so much in college loans and all this stuff. I would have killed for an opportunity like that. Go ahead and use my likeness or whatever. Likeness rights are a little bit different, and obviously we don't have to dive too deep into the weeds of all this. But that being said, like, I know the argument is there are a lot of people out there that would kill to be in these situations. Heck, there are athletes out there that would kill to be in these situations. There are softball players and wrestlers and gymnasts and baseball players that would love to have a fraction of the luxuries that football and basketball players have at Michigan or Kentucky or whatever it may be. I'm on my way to Rupp Arena right now in Lexington. I've been in that facility. I know how nice it is. I know how nice the player dorms are. I'm well aware of some of the luxuries that these guys get to experience. So that really has opened my eyes to being more sympathetic to the people that put in just as much work, care just as much about their sports, have to balance just as big of a work and class load as the football and basketball players do, travel just as much as those other athletes do, and don't get a fraction of the benefits that a lot of the revenue sport athletes get. So, I mean, like I said, you gave a very extreme example, but you know what? That's not an uncommon example.
Yeah, it was also a real world example because it was basically macaroni and cheese. There may or may not have been a Budweiser in the fridge. I mean, come on, we're in college. Let's be honest here. But yeah, coffee filters. That was that, or we would find a way into the locker room and take the entire roll of like paper towels from the thing. Yeah, yep. So we were good there for about a month. Now, a couple other topics I want to broach on before we let you roll here. One of which goes back to your days in Spirit Lake, Iowa. And after the Nationals last year, I'm sitting at the airport and with a wrestling fan, we start chatting up, and I realized this is the guy who was helping you guys out, Doc.
Oh, the Doc, of course.
Tell me about Doc and how much you leaned on him initially for your wrestling info.
Ryan Rolk, he's a chiropractor in Okoboji, and one of the biggest wrestling fans I know, and one of the smartest people I know, and one of my best friends, believe it or not. We're 20 years apart in age. He's 51, I'm 30, and he's somehow become one of my closest friends. And you know, we talk a couple times a week, and we talk about sports, we talk about life, we talk about his family, we talk about my family. And he was my partner on the radio in Spirit Lake, and he would explain to me the things that were happening on the mat and make me understand why this was important, Yeah, that constitutes a takedown, but this doesn't. These constitute near fall points, but these don't. And he just kind of gave me a quick sense of what he was looking at, what was important. I should also note that he's a much larger man than me. I'm about 5'7", and Doc, I want to say, is like 6'5", 6'6", has probably 120 pounds on me, maybe more. And that's me. It's probably not 120 pounds. I actually just thought of that, and he's going to listen back to this, and he's going to be offended by that. But he's a big dude, and he would put me in a headlock, or he'd put me in a half Nelson, and he'd put me in, like an arm bar, and kind of go, well, you see, Adam, you see how he's kind of maneuvering around his shoulder to do this, and I'd feel it, and I'd go, yeah, Doc, I feel it. I can see what's going on here. And he was really passionate about the sport. So when I got the chance to be on the wrestling championships, nobody was happier than Doc, and we found a role for him. We found a way for him to come down to the championships and be a part of the crew. And he got the media pass, and he'd go around and talk to people, and he'd, be kind of like almost like a researcher for us, and would get notes and nuggets and anecdotes while I would talk to one guy, maybe a coach or a wrestler here. He might go talk to the other side. And he understood some of the nuanced stuff about this. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of different things that wrestling fans are looking for in a broadcast, whether it's a style, whether it's a move, whether it is how a guy steps, or how a guy uses his arms or his hands, just little things like that is more nuanced, that, maybe more nuanced than what the casual fan might appreciate. And the reason I wanted to bring those things into a broadcast is because I'm still a fan at heart of sports, and I'm still a fan of athletes. And I want to know, all right, if he moves his hand here, if he approaches from this side or this angle instead of a higher angle, why is that important? And maybe I don't have the answer to it, but maybe I can ask the question. And it was just topical stuff, almost an editorial process that Doc would help me out with. And the guy's as smart as they come, and as passionate of a wrestling fan as I've known in my life. And he's become one of my closest friends too.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure we talked about him, because I had a really good conversation with him at the airport following last year in Madison Square Garden, and a couple other things I want to get to. One is that research, and I know that in other sports you don't have the benefit. And I'm gonna pat myself on the back here just for a moment. I produce a preview guide that, coincidentally, for those listening, just went on sale for the NCAA championships, and that's something I gave to ESPN. And when you're looking at things that sports provide, that's something I provide to you guys. It's what does that compare to, like, what softball provide? Everybody's got SID notes and things like that, but have you found that some sports they've got those people that are in the right places? Like, yeah, here's this thing that's really going to help you a little bit more.
Absolutely. And again, Jason did not bring this up with me beforehand. He didn't ask me to say anything about this. This is, for me, it was the quintessential preparation manual for wrestling, because it had historical notes. It had contextual information, leaderboards for this year, background on a lot of these guys. I would highly, and trust me, we did not take it for granted, the fact that you were gracious enough to help us out with those, JB. I promise you that. I would highly recommend it for anybody who has an interest in background, context, history of the championships. I would wholeheartedly recommend it. The new voice of the wrestling championships for ESPN is going to be Mike Cousins. You were the first thing I brought up, JB. I said, talk to this guy, find this guy. He will have some information for you that is going to be invaluable. I showed him last year's guide that you had put out for Madison Square Garden, which was just excellent, and Mike was blown away by it. And I wholeheartedly stand behind it. You do such a great job with it. And in other sports, it is not just the SIDs, because those are for the teams themselves. And I really bury my head into a lot of the SID notes for these programs when we dive into the wrestling championships. But it's also going back and reading articles and kind of understanding the process of how the year has gone. Who did you have to replace from last year to this year? Who are the guys that have been in the roles? Who are the guys that have already been there? And what is the growth process? What is the story of your season? How do I tell your story of the season? And this is for every sport, JB. How do I tell your story as an individual, as a team, as a coach? And how does it all contextualize into the broad scope? How does it contextualize into the big picture of that sport? Here are the guys that you want. Here are the guys that have stepped in. Here's what your roster looks like. Here's why you can contend for a title. And those are 4 very basic points, but there are a lot of branches off those limbs that you have to kind of pull together to try to understand the full story of the season. You're not going to get all this information in. Frankly, if you're trying to, you're probably doing the job wrong, because you're disregarding the action that's happening in front of you. But to have at least the context of where you were, where you are, where you want to be, and how are the people and personnel on this particular roster going to help you get there, that's kind of how we approach every single sport, and in particular in the wrestling championships. The process, real quick, JB, for how we go about calling the tournament is big picture early. We're showing you all these mats. Obviously, you have the particular mat announcers on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app. They're giving you the information of that particular mat. But on the national broadcast, our goal is to kind of give everybody who's just joining in, hey, here's what Oklahoma State this year. Here's one of their studs at 157. Here's what we can talk about. Hey, we're doing some 125 matches to start the day. Anthony, who are some of the guys that you really like at 125? Tim, who are the guys in the Big 10 or in the Big 12 that you saw over the course of the season that we need to watch out for? Let's introduce some people to the guys at Stanford and Oregon State at 141 that they're going to need to know about. Let's talk about the history of Cornell. They've got 8 wrestlers at the championships. Let's talk about them. And as the tournament goes on and as the sessions go forward, we start to zone in on the guys that are still on the mat. And that's how we approach all that. And that's why your guide is so great, JB, honestly, because we can start big picture and get the information as we go forward in the tournament, but also have that context and that background to work off of.
Yeah, see, now I don't even have to produce and ask you for a drop for this thing, because you just did it perfectly. And I was just kind of curious on the public file. Yeah, that was a loaded question completely, because I've got a product to sell here. But yeah, one, I appreciate it.
But seriously, I'm not blowing smoke, man. That's such a helpful thing. That's how I would want to organize information. You know, like the everything you need at your fingertips. I'm not using everything that you put out there, but everything that I could possibly need is out there. And I really, really do stand by a product like that. And I stand by the guide because of the knowledge that we can glean from something like that. That's how we want to prepare. We want to prepare in that regard. So I appreciate it.
Now moving to your travels and such, and we were, if you want to follow Adam on Twitter, it's at Adam Amin. Pretty simple there. But I'm watching some I think we're kicking off the season. I'm watching football from Fargo. You're on the call from the Fargo Dome, and one for wrestling people that know that Fargo Dome, when they see it on TV, it looks really weird because there's not 23 wrestling mats across it like we have the Junior Nationals there. But there's a point, and I'm sitting there going, dude, Herd and Horns for dinner, and sure enough, that's where you guys went. And let's talk about Fargo as a sports town, because wrestling people know it for various reasons. It's a big part of my career. Even the bar that burned down, that's where I met so many people in the sport of wrestling. My beloved Bison Turf, the dive bar. But I did a show from Herd and Horns last year. You went there. Well, let's talk about what's cool about Fargo from a sports perspective. If it's not a place you typically experience.
especially if you go there for football season, and obviously the success of the program in the last half decade, especially. And I know this year was a little tougher for North Dakota State fans losing in the semis, but to win 5 championships in a row, you have some expectations and you have some buzz when you go into a town and it's the start of football season and people are jacked up about it because they feel like they've got a big year in front of them. That buzz is palpable, man. And North Dakota State is a university that has branded itself as a real football university at the FCS level. And it's awesome. And heck, they beat Iowa this year. I mean, it's legitimate in terms of its quality as a football program. So to go into a town like that, where they're excited about the sport that's in front of them, that they want to be passionate about it, and they are passionate about it. The town almost revolves around the sport that's going on at that particular time. That's just awesome. And that's what we were talking about at the top, man. Like, the crowd is what feeds you. It kind of gives you the juice and the adrenaline that you need to get through some of the grind of this job. And when you go into the Fargo Dome and it is loud, I mean, it is deafening at various points over the course of a football game. Like, how do you not want to explode out of your chair? I mean, how do you not just get jacked up for something like that, for the atmosphere in a game like that? That's the type of town that you can easily get sucked into because of how much energy and passion they have. And I know it might sound cliche. I know passion is kind of a buzzword that we use in sports. That's true with the people in Fargo, with the fans in Fargo. They care. That's what we want. That's part of the reason I've enjoyed the wrestling championship so much. As an outsider who is calling this event, the fans care. And when they care, it's hard for you not to care. And that's what I love so much about college towns, particular events. When the buzz is there, when the crowd is passionate about it, it's hard not to get sucked into that.
And plus, it's the only place I've ever seen a double-decker Buffalo Wild Wings.
Wait, there's a what? There's a double-decker Buffalo Wild Wings there?
Yeah, right across the street from the Dome. The B-Dubs actually has an outdoor upstairs patio.
I totally missed that. How did we miss that? I mean, we were too busy.
It was December.
And by the way, thankfully we went in August, so I didn't have to worry about the weather as much. We did go to a place called Barbacoa in Fargo, which was just off the charts. Great food, great people. That was great. Herd and Horns was awesome, as we might have expected. And they're so passionate about ESPN coming into town, and they're always so great to us in Fargo. It was awesome.
Yeah, because we believe that USA Wrestling and NDSU football built the Buffalo Wild Wings. The first year I went out to Fargo was 1999 for the Cadet and Junior Nationals, and there was no B-Dubs. The next year there's a B-Dubs. Then they've added on to it. They've moved the bar. They expanded. Now they have a second floor rooftop bar and patio area. Underneath it is like a garage tailgating section. I mean, that whole side of the street that basically, everything has changed in like the last 18 years I've been there. And we spent a lot of time in that Buffalo Wild Wings come Fargo, because, or as we call it, Fargo, the Junior Nationals. But all right, we got a segment here. It's a blast of 10 questions, 90 seconds. I really don't keep a lot of time. It's kind of like whose line is it anyway? The points are made up and it's just for fun. But are you ready for I want the first thing that comes to your mind here. I don't need any deep thoughts by Jack Handy. I need some Adam Amin quick ones. Are you ready for the challenge?
Let's do it, JB.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Question 1. Who is your favorite person to follow on Twitter?
Oh, my God. Favorite Twitter follow is probably Jay Billis.
Good one. Yeah, I was going to say Johnny Football. No. Question 2. You won the Olympic gold medal. What are you having for dinner?
Oh, my God. It has to be tacos.
Who is the best athlete people don't talk about?
I'm going to say Kyle Dake.
All-time favorite flavor of Gatorade?
Fruit punch.
What's your favorite video game of all time?
Legend of Zelda.
Who is the more famous Valparaiso alum? Bryce Drew, Lloyd McClendon, or Adam Amin?
Bryce Drew.
Because of the shot. Because of nothing else but the shot.
If nothing else, shot. I'm happy to take like number 3 or 4 on the list. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, because I was looking through the alumni going, okay, congressman.
Hey,
baseball
don't
player.
Don't you dare forget about the voice of the Pillsbury Doughboy. All right, that's all I'm saying.
You're kidding me. I did not see that.
No, that is not a joke. Voice of the Pillsbury Doughboy is a full up.
Oh my goodness. Okay, back on. Okay, question 7: Is Side Out the greatest movie about volleyball ever made?
Yes.
Name another movie about volleyball ever made.
Can't think of one.
Exactly. If you could call one sports moment from history, what would it be?
It would be the Mets comeback in Game 6 of the '86 World Series.
Who was the funniest color commentator you've had to work with?
Doug Plank.
And what is the mascot for Indiana University, Purdue University of Fort Wayne?
It is the Mastodon.
Nailed it. Yeah, that's usually a bar bet question because I want to just dial it back here. Were you like the super sports nerd that like memorized all the college mascots at an early age? Because I'm wondering if I'm alone in that respect.
You know what? I actually wasn't. I was a big baseball guy. I was all about baseball. So like when it came to the Cubs and the National League, especially the NL East, I was really locked in to knowing everybody in the division. And that was the sport I was probably the most interested by was baseball. And that's the sport I played the most growing up. But when it came to everything else, I wasn't a big stat geek. I wasn't a big box score guy. It's just something that kind of developed as the years went on, my passion for some of the things that are important to being a broadcaster. But I wasn't that guy who knew he wanted to do this when he was 8 years old.
Yeah, because I definitely was. I was the I was the box score geek. I was the one calling the Daily Press, the newspaper I would eventually go to work at, to be like, can I get the top 25? Because I couldn't wait for the paper to come out. Because
that's so cool.
I remember Jeff Blake was the quarterback at East Carolina, and it was like they were making a run when I was like in 6th grade, and they were like the Cinderella story of the college football season. I was like, where's East Carolina ranked this week? But anyway,
that's awesome.
Yeah, not to be confused with the Blake who fictitiously played football at Texas State, home of the Armadillos. Now, last question. I realize I've said last question a couple times. This is something I just want to know from a sports perspective, because you're doing what I wanted to do. So I'm jealous in that respect. This is what you have the ability to do, is do so many different sports and so many different games and see the country and do what you love doing. And I've had that opportunity in wrestling, but wrestling kind of took me away from where I thought my career path was going when I was 16 years old. If 16-year-olds can have a career path. My question is, how much do you get to pay attention to the sports that you like and follow things on your own time if you're constantly researching games and upcoming events that you've got to call for your job? I mean, how much time do you spend on your own time going, okay, let's check out the Cubs, doing that stuff like knowing the division as a sports fan?
I think maybe one of the worst things about this job, strictly from a sports perspective, not necessarily beyond that, but strictly from a sports perspective, one of the worst things about this job is you do lose, I would say, a lot of your fandom. I think that's maybe the toughest part of this gig, is because everything you watch now, especially when you're, I'm not the only one, but there are a lot of people like me who cover multiple sports. I happen to cover a lot of them, between college football, college basketball, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, paying attention to college softball, the last 5 years being locked into wrestling over the course of the couple of months leading into it, college volleyball, just kind of knowing so much on the surface at the very least about a lot of these sports, and then diving into the weeds of them as you prepare for games. One of the tough things is you don't really get to watch anything or read anything for enjoyment anymore. A lot of it is, how can I use this when we go on air? Like, I can't really watch a big Monday basketball game with the purpose of enjoying a big Monday basketball game. I have to watch it for the purpose of knowing the result and what happened, so that I can use it maybe for some context on my Tuesday night or Thursday night broadcast. So there is a little bit of that lost, and you don't really have as much time to appreciate it. This year, this past year, the one change was, and again, I cover Major League Baseball. I'm locked into it from April to the end of the regular season. But during the playoffs, I'm not covering MLB anymore. So with the Cubs, the team I grew up rooting for because my father, who's an immigrant, came to the United States and became a Cub fan in the late 70s and passed that on to me and one of my brothers. It was different this year because I felt something different about this team. I covered this team during the year, and I felt that there was something different about them. So when they get to the National League Championship Series, I do get to kind of let my internal fan come out. I do get to root for them again. And I do get to have this inner child kind of try to bust out and say, I want these guys to win. I'm rooting for them. And the night of Game 7 of the World Series, I was in Connecticut. I wasn't at home. But when the game got to its final inning, I called my dad. And my dad and I were on the phone for the last half inning for the final 3 outs of Game 7 of the World Series. And when Chris Bryant made the final out, throwing to Anthony Rizzo at first, and the Cubs won, I cried and I wept. And I felt like a little kid again. And my father was on the other end of the phone. He was crying. And, all these memories for the both of us together and for him separately all kind of flooded back. And we got to appreciate that moment. That was the single biggest moment for me as a fan of my entire life. And I actually wrote about it afterwards. And I said, I don't think I'll ever have to be a fan again. And I know that for some people, I'm sure that's kind of sad because you're like, well, you have such a great history and you have memories of this team and it's involved with your family somehow. But for me, my fandom was validated that night. 30 years of my fandom, 39 years of my father's fandom. Like that was it for us. Like if the Cubs never won another game, I don't care. Like I've gone through the process of fandom, the highs and the lows and a lot of lows for that particular team, and getting to the pinnacle of your sport as a fan, watching your team win a championship. I've been there. So for me, it's more about the experience and it's more about appreciating what my father and I went through as fans together. And anything beyond that is just gravy at this point. So that is, I know there's a little bit of melancholy in that as a sports fan, but for me, I've kind of been validated at this point. So it doesn't concern me as much anymore.
Yeah, I had the similar situation. Granted, I'm not a Cubs fan, so I'm not that much of a glutton for punishment. But I grew up a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan and a California Angels fan. So that is in Virginia. So that's really rough. And then when I started following pro basketball, the Orlando Magic. So Vernon Maxwell, not my favorite guy. Nick Anderson, who I had the jersey after he missed the 4 free throws, not my favorite guy. Yeah. But so 2002 was the greatest sports year of my life because the Angels won the World Series, the Bucks won the Super Bowl, and the only championship in my fantasy football league that I've been in for 20 years. So that was the greatest sports year of my life. I can die happy.
That's one heck of a holy trinity for you, my brother.
Well, the thing is, I was supposed to go to Vegas that year. You know how they have these weird parlays? Well, pick this team to win the World Series, pick this team to win the Super Bowl. I would have done it. I was supposed to go, didn't make that trip. And I would have probably, I don't know, I think that was a $50,000 payoff with $100 on the Angels and the Bucks. But anyway, Adam, Amin, tell us where we can follow you on Twitter and they can keep up with your exploits. Even though you won't be around the wrestling mat nearly as much anymore, where can the fans keep up with you? And, you've got some pretty insightful social media tweets there. So, throw them at your handle.
No, absolutely. At Adam Amin, ADAMAMIN. It's been a blast. The last 5 times I've gotten a chance to be Matt's side on a Saturday night. It's one of the best events I've ever gotten a chance to cover, honestly, year in and year out. Biggest reason for that is the energy that fans bring every year to that. So don't lose that energy. Keep supporting it. Keep supporting ESPN. We love having those championships. It's a big part of the production. I know some fans probably would disagree or they might not know about it, so they might just assume that we don't care about it. I promise you the people who work on that show are passionate and energetic, and they love that show, and they want to do the best possible job. Give them constructive feedback if you have it. Keep supporting it. I promise you you'll have the outlet to watch it every single year if you guys keep supporting it. It's such a great product to be a part of. I really did love it. Pride of Addison Trail, thanks for coming on the program, man. We'll see you down the line. Thanks, my man. Have a good one.
You are listening to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast with my daddy, Jason Bryant.
I hope you heard that, folks, because you are going to be hearing that testimonial from Adam Amin from now until March. Because, again, like he said, I didn't prep him for this. I didn't ask him for a testimonial. He just kind of gave it to me. And what am I referring to? Yes, the preview guide. What he is talking about is the digital preview guide that is now on sale, available for pre-order for the 2017 NCAA Division I championships. You get this by going to MattTalkOnline.com/FanGuide17. That's FANGUIDE 17. And use the promo code podcast. It'll save you $5. You get it for listening to this. I'm not putting that promo code, that offer code out on social media anywhere. You're going to save $5 off the cover price. This is a resource that is unlike any other. And you heard Adam talk about it. And this is a guy coming in, and broadcasters are using this. Everything you need to know. Tim Johnson gets a copy of it. Jim Gibbons, everybody that ESPN gets a copy of this thing. And you can get the exact same information. I provide this for the wrestling community. ESPN is, you know what? They've been a beneficiary of this. This is something that, and I'll be honest with you, I don't give it to them. They pay for the printing because they get the actual hard copies. This is a digital copy that you will get optimized for your tablet. You sit there and you scroll through it. You get quick links and say, hey, I want to see what the 125-pound records are. Boom. What you want to do here. Boom, 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 boom. I'm not going to have to preach this to you because Adam Amin just gave you the best sales pitch that I can. This is a guy that works hundreds of sporting events a year. And if he's saying that he's going to be a fan of this book, I really, really think you will too. Again, remember, it's digital, and you get it digitally delivered March 14th. Pre-order right now at MattTalkOnline.com/FanGuide17. And I want to say Adam's a cool dude to really get to know over the years. So we don't have a whole lot of time to talk when we're at events. But, like us, I'm not BSing when I tell you that I'm jealous of his route. And I don't mean jealous because I don't like wrestling. Honestly, what he did, I mean, he's hired at ESPN at 24 years old. That is where I wanted to be. And to see a guy like that, really have a good respect for the sport and go through and, he's sitting there. Oh, boom, there he is. He's the guy. And you know what? He took it as a craft and he learned it. And I was glad that to get to know him and have him on the call for the last couple NCAA championships. Granted, that's where I wanted to be one of these days. But hey, you know what? I'm happy with my PA job. I'm quite happy with that. I'm really happy with that. Matter of fact, I love that. Yeah. Anyway, I just want to thank Adam for coming on, man. Just real good banter. Anytime I get another broadcaster on, we can, you see, it's not like an alpha male thing where you're like, well, my broadcasting voice has to sound better. No, it's just we just have a lot of fun. Like when Shane comes on, I mean, I think I could probably get Adam on to talk an hour about sports in general. But we're a wrestling show. We want to get we'll maybe get Mike Cousins on, the new voice coming up after he goes through St. Louis, and we'll see how he works with Tim Johnson and Anthony Robles. And I know he follows us on Twitter, or at least he follows me on Twitter. So we're warning you, Mike. You're in our crosshairs now. But Adam Amin, dude, thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, continually growing. And thank you in advance for buying the Matt Talk Online preview guide. I know you are, because you're going to save $5. But go to MattTalkOnline.com/FanGuide17 and using the offer code podcast. Why am I beating this to death? Because this is one of the very few revenue streams that I have for this network. Another one is through your team memberships, and it's, for lack of I'm going to say the nasty D word, donation. Yeah, you're actually contributing monthly to keep everything rolling here. You got 19 shows. You should see the podcast hosting bill alone. Anyway, but I do this because I love it. And you know what? I really appreciate the fact that those of you, your team memberships, that are really helping push this thing going. And as I said, that Legend Series is coming. We're going to move into February. Just released some killer episodes. Mikey Hayes from Old Dominion for the ODU Monarch Mattcast. Great interview there. Jeff Swenson and Jim Miller. We were talking Battle of the Bergs. That's coming up Thursday, February 2nd. I'm stoked for that. That's going to be here in Minneapolis. I'm going to be on the PA for that. Augsburg called me up and said, hey, we want you for that. And I'm like, you know what? Battle of the Bergs? Yeah, I'm in. Count me in. That is a tremendous rivalry in Division III. I recommend everybody to hit the Matt Talk Podcast Network up at MattTalkOnline.com/Ice18 to hear the architects of the Battle of the Bergs, Division III's finest rivalry. I'm going to say in any sport. Okay, I'm glued into wrestling. Of course, I'm going to be super biased, but it might be Division III's finest rivalry, and it might be one of wrestling's top three. Jeff Swenson thought it was might have been one. I think Oklahoma State, Iowa goes way back, and we got Bedlam and the Cyhawk stuff. Those I think just based on predating it, because we really saw the rise of the Wartburg-Augsburg rivalry in the mid-'90s. So that's we've only got about 20-some years of that really to generate the interest. But, man, it has been fierce. And so go to MattTalkOnline.com/ice18 to check out Jeff Swenson and Jim Miller talk about it. If you don't know who I'm talking about, Jeff Swenson's the AD at Augsburg, was the longtime head coach. Jim Miller, the retired head coach of Wartburg, and they went at it. Wartburg and Augsburg have won every single Division III national title since 1995, folks. They're one or two typically. National duels, they've met in the finals 10 of the 16 years. Yeah, they're the standard of excellence in Division III. Like them or not, they are the standard of excellence, and that was a fun episode. So that's all I've got for this episode. I want to say thank you to those who have already bought the guide on the pre-sale. Again, I'm going to be working diligently over the next month and a half to finish this thing. And there's a lot of stuff that's just simply been updated, but I keep trying to add more stuff because I was talking to people at New York last year about what they thought about it. And they're like, man, you should sell it for double. Well, no, I'm not selling it for double because I just, you got to keep it to a price point that people want. And, I'm also throwing some discount codes out there. And of course, one of them is podcast. So you listen to the show, you can find it. I'm tweeting things out. If you're on a patron of the network, you get it already. If you're already at that $10 level or more, there's certain ways to find little price breaks on it. And if you are a part of this network and it's team membership by going to MattTalkOnline.com/join the team, you can find a way to get that as part of your team membership. But that's all I got. I'm beating you over the head with calls to action, because I need to make this thing move, man. Because just honestly, it's a sales pitch. It's a freaking sales pitch is what this is. But when people tell me how much they enjoy it, because I sit there and wonder, is this worth it? Is this worth it? Hell yes, it's worth it. Because the fact that I can use all these things at my disposal and give you, the wrestling fans, something that will answer almost every single one of your questions about the current tournament. Hey, what's this guy's record? Got it. When did that guy lose? Got it. What's the win streak? Got it. What are the records? Got it. Who's got the most falls at 133? Got it. Who's got the most tech falls at 141? Got it. Who has the most bonus victories overall? And I'm not talking like the NCAA standings. I'm talking stuff that, like, for your pick'em leagues and your fantasy stuff, you're like, I need a 149 pounder who has a lot of bonus points. Guess what? I can give you that information. MattTalkOnline.com/FanGuide17. That's the last thing you're going to hear about it today. I'd like to thank Adam Amin again for coming on the program. Follow him at Adam Amin, and just all around good dude. So he spent a lot of time with us. He's a busy guy, and I like you for spending your time with me because, one of these days I got to get a better. No, you know what? No, it's not. I don't need a better sign off. I have the perfect sign off for this show because I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me. Because say it with me now, you've always got time for short time.
Show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.